Ian. So yes, the seminar is being, or the webinar is being recorded. Seminar, gee, I haven't heard that term for a while. We're so into webinars these days, aren't we? This is being recorded so that you can receive it afterwards and watch anything that you might want to dig into. But also part of our protocol is that if people register but they can't make it to this time, given international time zones, especially people that are sort of on the EMEA, like the European, Asia Pacific timeline, then this at least is a way for them to be able to get access to what we talk about and that can help them. So welcome. So this is our ID Masterclass. This is where we dig in a little more deeply into some of the nuances around the topic of the month, which this month is all about giving and receiving feedback, because we all think about learning skills for how to give feedback. And in fact, when I thought about this after last session, I thought about so much of the training that is out there on feedback is about how you give the feedback, but there's also just as valuable a training on where are you at to receive the feedback. And as we went through last week, there's definitely a role for us to sort of sharpen the pencil on how we receive the feedback. So today we're going to dig in a little bit further. What I'd encourage you to think about is, if in the last week you've either received feedback, given feedback, and have got some specific examples that you'd like to dig into, there will be time today for that conversation. So today is more of a conversation than me making a presentation about the topic. What we always do when we start the ID Masterclass is we do a peak performance check-in. So this is where we just take stock for a minute on where are we at in terms of being in stride with our true authentic self, our ID. And the way we do that is on a scale of 0 to 10. If you think about 10 being you really in stride and absolutely shining, and a 1 out of 10 is way out of stride, what's the number that comes up for you today? And I just ask you to put it in the chat. Click the chat button down the bottom and put your number in there. So I can see Phyllis, you're an 8. Let's just see what everyone would say. 9 for Greg, that's great. 7 Cliff. Amanda, a 9, consistently high for you, Amanda. That's great to see. Okay, some high scores. We typically do have pretty decent scores in this class because people are pretty self-aware, and not just of their strengths and vulnerabilities, but of what they need to be doing to live their life very much in stride. And one of the things we say is that the place you want to be like radiating that energy, where people have an influence on others, even though they haven't, in their mind, they haven't said or done anything, is from an 8. There's something about that sort of score where it starts to ooze out of you. So that's what I would encourage all of you to get to. Does anyone have anything they'd like to share about their score, or ask the brain's trust of the group here for how you might get from your current score, say there's a 7, we've got a few 7s there, and how you get to an 8, 9, or a 10. Any questions or comments from anyone?
I'll break the ice a little bit. I was a 6 earlier today, so I took advantage of a little break in my schedule and actually went and worked out and took a little time away from sitting in front of the desk. And that is why I'm an 8 right now, because being a 6 does not allow me to ooze goodness.
And Phyllis, did you go and do that because you realized that you're a 6?
Oh, yes. Yes, that's exactly why I did it.
That's the power of this, isn't it? It's not that you just went and did it anyway. It's that you were consciously aware that you weren't at your best, and then knew, what do I need to go and do it? And sometimes if you just ask that question and let your mind answer, today it was exercise. Tomorrow it might be, I just need a break, or it might be, talk to a particular person and resolve a certain issue. But if you just have the stillness of that time to step back and ask the question, in that moment comes an answer. So well done.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else?
Well, I was an 8 earlier today. I was giving somebody a tour of our platform and showing them how the PPI worked, but now I've got something that's not working that's supposed to be working. So I'm like, that just grinds my gears totally. I'm like, why isn't this working? It should be so, so just give me a little dip here, but I'm sure once I have a few moments to settle in with it and figure it out, it'll pop right back up again.
It's interesting, Cliff, I've often wondered that myself, with certain instincts, but you're actually attracted. The irony is you're attracted with your idea, you're attracted to things
That's right.
that are not working because
Yep.
your whole drive is to get them working. Verifiers are attracted to problems because they love solving problems. And yet when they're in the problem, they're going, why the freaking hell isn't this thing working? And why is it always me that's got to get involved in doing, completers are attracted to a mess because they like to bring order and structure to things. And then you get the improvisers talking about how negative the situation is. And I hate negativity and all that. Why am I surrounded by negativity? Because you bring light and laughter and joy and positivity to that group. And so the irony of life is that we're actually attracted to the opposite of what we believe that we stand for. And if we did have no problems to solve as a verifier, we'd have nothing to do. If everything was working fine, you'd have nothing to do as an authenticator. So it's just really interesting to understand that. And I found that helps me at times when I'm in a situation that feels like, why me? It's like, because it's me, like that, it's my role to play.
Yes, thank you.
Anybody else?
Maybe that's why I always give myself a 9, because whatever's going on, I always ask the question, hang on, what does this need to do? I go straight to maybe being that 8, which is this ain't real, this ain't right. And I go straight to my 2 and go, all right, what are we going to do? And there isn't much time to wallow in it. And when I would really give a low score is when I'm overwhelmed with something and I'm wallowing. What I call wallowing, it would be unkind to someone else. They're just processing it, right? And that's why I use the word wallowing, because I go, dude, you're going to do something about this, or you're going to wallow, And I think that whenever I do this PPI thing, I just go 9, and then if there's something going on that's a drama that I have to deal with, I just deal with that drama. I don't have time to mark myself on a score of a PPI. Like, I've got shit to do now, right? There's nothing really wrong, something to do. And like you other authenticates, is that you similar like that? Do you have like what's the scoring? I got stuff to do, or do you? Is that just me?
You mean the proclivity for action, Greg? That you move very quickly to doing something about it?
Yeah, the dealing with it sooner rather than the being in it sooner,
Right.
Longer. Yeah.
Is that an authenticated trait? That's what you're asking. So let's ask the other authenticators. There's a bunch of authenticators on the call. Are you more inclined to move very quickly to action, or do you find yourself being caught in wallowing in the stuff longer than what you want to? Jill, you're a 7 and you're also a 2, and I can see you sort of smiling. So I'm guessing.
And she's grinning. Get Jill.
I don't know. I can wallow. I notice that I feel that way sometimes. To be completely transparent, as an authenticate, I get impatient with other people when they are in the wallowing kind of thing, Yeah. And that's something Ilona pointed out, because she has a very similar profile. It's just and Phyllis, like that there tends to be a little bit of an impatience to our particular pattern. So maybe it shows up in that way.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I remember, I think it was you, Amanda, saying when we talked about this, I think in a previous webinar, like maybe in April, and you were saying you just need to, it's not really wallowing. It was more like processing it, but you need to like stay there for a bit and work it through, and then you're ready. So I think to me that was really helpful to change. And I'm not the same idea as Jill, but in terms of getting impatient with someone else, realizing that they're not necessarily stuck or staying there, or wallowing, they're processing it and they're on their way. They're just, taking longer than what I was thinking was necessary. So anyone who's a 2 incomplete, and I know a bunch, I know Susie, I know Greg, I'm thinking of Pam, but that 2 incomplete is just like impatient. The impatience is just the thing. whether it's with yourself or whether it's with others. It's just like one of the traits of that drive. And I say it as a positive as well as a negative, if you like. Like impatience has a negative connotation about it, but it's the impatience of that drive that drives you to action really quickly, which, Greg, I think that's much of what you're referring to, comes from that place. All right. Is there anyone else that wants to talk? I'm curious about the 7s, because I don't want to just sit at the 7. We have a protocol in our team that if anyone is below a 7, that we will talk about it and deal with it to help people get to a higher score. But really, for our level of self-awareness, we want to play at those 8s, 9s, and 10s and be making that difference for others in the world. So 7 looks like an acceptable score to the outside world, but in our ID world, it's below our benchmark of that 8, 9, and 10. So I just wonder whether anyone wants to either talk about it or get some help with how they would shift, or can you see what you would do to shift from where you are to a higher score?
Yeah, as a 7 for myself, I feel like I'm dog paddling a little. Like to have a little bit more head above water. That's the only reason though. But you're absolutely right. From the outside world, that might be like fine, but to me, I'm like, I'm not liking this. I need to get back in control of everything. So I think I know what I need to do. I just need to knock some things out and take a step back then and say, okay, what needs to get done here? What needs to get done here?
Have you, Chris, with yours? I mean, you can get things done, but have you made a list?
Oh, I make lots of lists. So the fact of the matter is that I need a list. True.
Yeah.
That one list to rule them all, kind of thing.
Yeah, it's amazing the minute if you actually took the time to just simply make the one list and get all the other lists sort of back organized again, just that feeling will change your score.
Oh, I know it will. Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, and it's a great example of how there are simple strategies that we can engage with to just change the number like that, if we know what the trigger is. And for people with your ID, it's just making that list. Yeah, good on you. And good on you also for not settling at the 7 and knowing the difference between how you feel at the 7, which is like coping. To everyone else, you probably look fine, but in yourself, you know that it's not you at your absolute best,
Are you wanting people who are at 7s to comment? Is that what your invitation is, Paul?
Yes.
For me, it's just that I have a pretty long list, and I realize that the things that are left on the list are things that require a lot of decisions, and I don't want to have to do it. It's a lot of resistance to the decisions I have to make. I'm really good at just ticking off all the to-dos that are action, but then when I have to actually commit and think and let go of certain options, which is what decision making is. So it's kind of that what I have in front of me is a little bit annoying. So that's a bit where I am. I welcome any suggestions.
Well, thank you. And we'll get them from the group. What normally works for you? Have you got like a strategy that you often call on in this situation to get moving and get yourself to a better place? And we will ask the team as well.
Really, it's just sort of forcing myself into one of the decisions, and then it gets it moving, and I'm not in resistance to it anymore. So it's really just doing it. It's just buckling down and doing the thing that I'm not as excited about doing. Caffeine can help. Yeah, just even a little bit of a mental break of like appreciating something good and then diving in.
Yeah, they're all good. They're all really, when I hear you mention them and I overlay your ID, they all fit, all those strategies. And I can also see the change in you, as you say them, you react really positively about them. What about the rest of the group? Has anyone got a suggestion for Jill? Especially if you've got a similar ID, like Greg, Phyllis, there's a few of you who've got similar IDs. Susie, Cliff. What would you do?
It's a bit noisy here where I am, so I'm just going to keep my mic on silent. But I agree already with what Jill has, the strategies that Jill has talked about 100%. Caffeine has to be at the top of the list, but I've got some friends here today, so there's my friends. This is a distraction is another good strategy for me. That's definitely something that when you have to move on, it's a bit harder. I'll leave you all to it.
Thank you.
Now, one last thing, Phyllis, there is data with Dr. Russell Barkley's doing a lot of stuff about ADHD and how more prevalent it is in our culture. And I'm on the spectrum for sure. And I reckon if everyone with a down complete is in a fashion, it turns a lot of the behaviors. So don't dismiss the copy. They call that self-medication. They're actually sometimes, because of the basal ganglia and the impact that copy does, it gives the excitement to that part of the brain that's going da da da, and it actually calms us down. And if you notice that you can have a coffee, you get calmer, then it's a really great self-medication. But if it's up to 3 in a day, then see a doctor.
So Jill, I would suggest a couple of other things to you in addition to what you just said, because even something as simple as just taking a break and getting a distraction changes your state. And for a 2 incomplete, that's a great strategy. But a couple of other things to think of. Your ID is a reactive ID. It's best when it's reacting. So as opposed to thinking and processing. So when you're looking at it as a whole lot of stuff to get done and you're on your own, that's a grind. But if you can react, like if there's someone else that can brainstorm it with you and you can react to the conversation, but the more you can shift it to a reactive place, and I think conversation, so the first thing that came up for me was, who do you have that you can, sort of talk it through with? Because that's collaborative, which is you, it's brainstorming, which is you, but you can then react to even yourself. As you hear yourself saying, so you go, oh God, what? I just need to do this. Let me pick up the phone now and do it, but you need something to get started, and reacting, goes together. But the other thing I think is worth knowing is you do things when they're needed, and maybe you're not doing them because fundamentally it doesn't matter. If they really mattered, maybe you would. And so the fact that you haven't done them, the world's not on fire, maybe they're there to be done, but it's not really mission critical yet. And you tend to react when it's really mission critical. And maybe if you don't do them, you won't waste any time and energy and resource on them. So it may not be such a bad thing, But I would maybe it's worth stepping and saying, yeah, they're on the list and they were supposedly important, but are they really essential for me to be doing them and doing them today? Maybe they're not.
I love that. I love that. There's a few things that are like, oh, I'm having a few ahas. I love the suggestions just because the talking something through with somebody else, I just have thought of that as my extroversion type, just but seeing it in terms of the ID is great. And also, and it's one of the things I've been knocking around in my head is maybe if I'm not prioritizing it, it's because it's not really the right time to prioritize it. And there's going to be a time where it's going to be full speed ahead, clear, and I'm happy and I've got the wind in my sails and I'm going to kick butt and take names, and it's going to have a flow to it as opposed to the grind. Yeah, I like that. I like thinking of it, and it's just affirming something. It's validating something that I was already sort of considering. I think the tricky part is just when it gets into long-term versus short-term and things that need to get done without waiting till the last minute. Sometimes I don't know if we have the luxury of waiting for the flow state. Sometimes we do need to grind through. So, yeah.
Well, you'll find a couple of other things. One is that if you just get started, and you said this yourself, sometimes the blocker for an avoid complete is you're looking at all the stuff and it's just too much, it's too big. But if you just get started on something, it's like you kick yourself into gear. And that's what I would say is what's the thing you can get started on, as small and as insignificant as it might seem. But once you get started, it's something kicks into gear. A classic example is just exercise. If you're sort of thinking about, I need to get fit, I need to lose weight, and it's all this big mission, you can put you off because I haven't got time and this and that. But if you just said, what can I just do right now? And I'm just going to go for a walk. even just doing that might be enough of the icebreaker to then begin a journey, and then you made a comment before that I think is worth calling out for all of us here, to be more aware of one of those things about the avoid verify drive when it comes to decision making, because avoid verifiers go by their gut, and sometimes you don't have a gut. If someone said, what's your gut feel on this? It's possible that you don't have one, and that generally means don't do it. There's no, it's not the time for action. So when something's right, you have this visceral gut feeling that it's right. You can also have a visceral gut feeling that something is wrong. And a no gut feeling is more on the side of the, not the wrong, but the do nothing than doing something. So if your gut check is, I don't really have any sort of gut on whether I need to do it or not, that generally means you don't have to do it. So I think you can use that, given you're an avoid verify, you can use that to advantage as well. All right, guys, let's, I can see there's a few chats happening there. If anything is relevant, I'll rely on Ian or Greg calling some of those things out. I'll keep moving with our webinar today. So before we get into the webinar, a couple of just housekeeping things. We have our next ID certification program coming up. Ian, do you just want to share the dates with the team, please?
29, 30 and 6th of June. So 29, 30, and that they're the US dates.
Of May, and then
Of May and then 6th June, yeah.
Yeah. So if anyone is interested in doing or redoing the ID certification program, and I specifically say redoing because we have people over the years, many people have done the ID certification 3 times. I know one lady who did it 4 times, and each time, because you're learning with a different mindset, you learn at a completely different level. So the first time can be almost overwhelming, and the second time allows you to dig into some of the nuances, where because you've heard the basics before, you can start to listen for and learn and react to a lot of the nuanced understandings, like things like how the different drives work together, that sort of nuance, you get that better. The third time around, people have said to me, what was really cool was it was great validation. It was great for my confidence, because I did know a lot of it, and as I heard people asking questions, I could think up answers, and the instructors sort of validated that was the right direction. So it was very confidence boosting, So if you want to really build your practitioner skills with ID, even if you've already done the certification program, I'd encourage you to not see it as a once off, but as something that you might revisit, like we do in this program. I mean, there's times we come back to our webinars each month, and there's always little nuances that we pick up on from what people share. So keep that in mind if you've already done it and would maybe consider doing it again. The second thing I want to share with you is that we're taking on future topics for the webinars. So if there's something you particularly like us to cover as a theme for the month, so whatever it might be that's on your mind, put them in the chat. And if you think of something after today, let Ian know what was on your mind, and we'll look to incorporate that into one of our future monthly themes. But I'd encourage you, we've got 35 minutes left today. So if, as we go through the rest of the webinar, something occurs to you as a topic that you'd really like to dig more into, please whack it in the chat. We'll take stock of that and incorporate that into our planning for future webinars. The third thing I want to share with you from a housekeeping point of view is we're going to make a pivot on our webinars. We're going to make an adjustment to the way that we're doing them. So a bunch of things are going to stay the same. So firstly, we're going to keep doing the webinars. We're going to keep doing them twice a month. We're going to keep doing the living in stride, general presentation at the start of the month, and the ID Masterclass 2 weeks later. So, and the same time, so everything that respect is the same. The pivot is that we're going to shift more to a business focus than just a personal focus. So digging in more to business applications. It'll still be relevant to everyday life, because all of us, no matter what size business that we might be in, it's all about how you do whatever it might be in stride. So if it was about giving feedback, for example, which people use in business, how do you do that in stride? If it's about conflict, even building teams, there's going to be a lot around interacting with people and relationships that you can probably also incorporate into marriages and parenting. You know, it would be pretty easy to join those dots, but the focus is going to have more of a business pivot. And the reason we're doing that is because we are building out a customer success motion with ID. So we want to help people better understand how they can take advantage of the platform. The platform, I don't know whether you've been in and spent some time digging into it. It's just brilliant. The capabilities, the functionality that's there now for the individual to learn and keep learning about themselves and to learn about others and then about teams. It's just a brilliant platform. And there's now a mechanism, if you haven't, you may not know this already, but it's now possible to receive coaching tips at the frequency that you choose via text message. So without you having to come into it, you can go into your account and set it up so that it will send you a text message send you a coaching tips by text message, you know, once a week, twice a month, whatever the frequency is that you choose. You can receive it by email, but you can now get it by text message. And get this, you can now get a reminder to go in and check your peak performance score on a frequency that's important to you. So you could set it up to say, you know, every Friday morning, I just want to do a PPI check and I want to keep track of it. And so when you go in and score that, you know, put your score in on the platform, it not only records your score, it records the reasons for your score. So when you say, well, I'm a 6, and you tick the boxes as to what's behind the 6, it records that. So you can observe the pattern over the course of weeks and months of how your score tracked and what were the reasons for the score being what it is. And let's just say that your score is low and you're putting down that a lot of the reason is because of, you know, negative energy around you. And you see that over several months. You wouldn't have to be Einstein to figure out that maybe it's time you did something about all that negative energy, you know. But I think it's a really wonderful way of keeping the idea alive in people's minds and keeping them using the platform. So a lot of the pivot when we talk about the business applications, we'll of course have these conversations, but we'll also be showing people how to use the value of the platform in solving some of these problems as well. The platform is what's allowing us to scale. And if you follow the history of ID, I was telling Phyllis yesterday, I mean, back when the ID was developed, we didn't even have the internet. There was no internet. Everything was done live, either one-on-one or in live workshops. And now not only do we have the benefit of the internet and all these collaborative technologies, but we can really scale to thousands of people thanks to the you know, capabilities of the platform. So I'd really encourage you to dig in and check that out and look at how you can be coding it for yourself to, you know, stay more in stride each and every day. I think they were the three key things. I think that's it. Any questions? All right, let's move into the focus on feedback. So I'll share my slides here from last week. Can you see the slide okay?
Yep. It was funky to begin with, but looking good now.
Thank you, Cliff. All right, so one of the things, I'm just going to do a quick recap. One of the things that we talked about with feedback was focusing on where you're at as the giver of the feedback, but being much more conscientious of the person that's going to be receiving the feedback. And where are they at? Are they in stride? Do you have a connection with them? You know, are they sort of geared up to receive the feedback maybe the way that you want them to? And how might they interpret it, misinterpret it, just being more aware. Now, this is really challenging because when most people are giving feedback, and especially if there's emotion in it, it's quite natural for most people to be thinking about the content of the feedback, what they want to say. They're not thinking about how that feedback's likely to land, or more specifically, who is the person receiving the feedback and how might they need to be receiving it so that it lands the way you're intending and that it's actionable the way you probably want to see them take action. But this really adds a lot more of a challenge to the skill of giving feedback, is because you've got to think about it from the other person's perspective as well as your own. And a big part of that occurs by being more in stride. So that's why we keep coming back to this slide, because this is everything. The problem is when you're not in stride, and I'm saying when you're not an 8, 9, or 10, it's your focus invariably, and this is all subconscious, is more inward. It's more about you. You're worried about your own self, thinking about your own day, you know, your own overwhelm, anxiety, frustration, whatever it might be. When you get into that 8, 9, and 10 level, because you're good, you're free to put your focus and your emphasis externally, putting it out on other people. So if you want to really get to that place where you can focus on not just what you want to say, but things like, what do you want them to do about it? And how do you need to share it in a way that it works for them? So you've got more of an external focus. You've got to get in stride. And, you know, in addition to any of the techniques we might talk about today, building on last week, if you did nothing else but get in stride yourself and make sure that before you gave feedback, you were in a really good place. And then secondly, made sure you're coming from a place of authenticity, like speak from the heart, not, well, how am I going to fabricate this so that it works? But, you know, talk just sincerely from the heart, just those two things. Get in stride, be authentic. That will probably be 80 or 90% of you being really good at giving feedback. They're saying that it's going to be one of the major skills of leading in the future, is the ability of leaders to give really good feedback. And I think it's particularly challenging when so many of them are working remotely and virtually now. It sort of amps that, you know, that skill up a little bit. But it all starts from being in stride and getting authentic. And then we went through talking about when we overlay your ID, we went through talking about giving feedback, like what are the things that are biases on your ID to be more aware of. And some of these I added in that came from the conversation last week. I'll just spend a second here for you to maybe get these back in your mind. These, by the way, all these slides are sent out with the recording after the webinar for those of you here who are new. So don't worry about notes. If you're just writing down what's on the screen, you'll receive these anyway. Does anyone have any reaction or questions or additions that they can see might be relevant for them when you think about yourself giving and receiving feedback on the receiving side? Is there anything you would add to these?
Well, I was looking at the avoid verify, and it occurs to me that if I perceive the feedback as being in the past, I'm less open to it. I know I'm less open to it.
Ah, that's a great nuance. Thank you, Cliff. Is that true for other
You've
avoid
already
verify?
addressed it. I've already done it. Hey, Cliff, you've already dealt with this, and
Nothing
it's
I can do about it now.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
tell me let's talk about what we can do next time.
So is that an effective way of doing it? Is saying next time or in the future, let's.
For me, it is personally, you know, and I'll say this loud enough so my wife can hear it in the other room. You know, definitely much more positive when it is, hey, you know, next time let's think about how we might do this differently, or then it becomes something exciting that I'm very engaged in. But if you're just talking about all the bad things that happened in the past, I'm like, yep, I screwed that up. I'm not sure what else you want, you know, I can do about it. So, you know, and that's my own bias receiving it that way, but there's a way to do it that really gets me forward looking and enthusiastic about it.
And it has to be real for the use authenticate, and especially coupled with the avoid verify, use authenticate, use improvise. It has to be tangible and real. I don't react well with, I think they thought you, like it really needs to be something that's concrete, or else you just might as well write me off.
Thank you, Phyllis.
Also, I will say, speaking just particularly from this whole pattern, from my whole pattern is like, yeah, I need to know what to do about it. Like I cannot, like no more, okay, like Like, but one thing, actual, instead of a defensive reactive way, it can be more asking, like, when there's a tendency for it just to come without what I'm needing, like without what the future state request, like, then I can ask, what do you need? What do you need that I can do something about now? I'm sorry. And it's a very cautious, I'm sorry, because I don't want to be beaten over the head by it again and again. It's like, what do you need? That I can work with. I'm willing to accept I'm fallible. What can I do about it?
That's really good, Jill. Thank you. It's a great addition. I'll add these in, guys, to the slide.
Yeah, spend less time on why it's a problem and we should have known better and all that, and more on what we're going to do about it. Yeah, we already know the house is on fire. Can we go get a hose, please?
But Greg, what caused the fire?
Paul's took over his cup and thought it's okay. The plants need watering. Look, it's all right. Don't feel bad, man.
All right. Anybody else?
That's actually a good point. We don't care what caused it particularly, except to know how do we prevent it next time. That we dwell too much on the why and the who and the blame part. That really is avoiding time fixing it. It's only why it happened is only useful to get ready for next time. It's not to understand anything. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I got to say, even as a verifier, I'd much rather get the fire out than worry about the why. We can worry about the why later. Anything else here, particularly for the avoid authenticate and avoid improvise drives? Those of you who are avoid improvise, do you see anything else for you when you're receiving feedback that you'd want to add into this slide? I would add for one I've just thought of for the avoid authenticate, and I just check this with the other avoid authenticates here, is if I feel accused and not given the benefit of the doubt, in the same way that Cliff said, I would shut down if it's, if it's in the past, I'm less open to it. If I feel that someone has just made an accusation or an assumption about something without giving me the benefit of the doubt, I'm not really as open to hearing their feedback as they want me to be.
Yes. Yeah, it has to be the right spirit. It's not intended just to, criticize. It's intended to be, you can, hurt, maim, distort. Then it's like, no, not going to happen.
I remember Tracy Kennedy, some of you know her, she'd often, when she was working with me, she'd not often, always would start with, Paul, I know you wouldn't have meant this. Knowing you wouldn't have meant this, but this is how this, and I'm like, I'm with you, Trey. Like I'm hearing it the whole time. But as if she just started with, you did this, or like in some sort of accusatory tone, my reaction would have been completely different.
Just a quick question. The avoid would be on the downside of something, right? So for example, improvise, I'd be a 3. I believe.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
So interestingly, what I thought when I was looking at this is sometimes the silence does mean I'm hurt, but I'm processing it. So give me a minute.
No, that's right. It doesn't mean that you're not hurt as well, even, but so often when you're silent, it's actually working, you're processing it.
I think it also, particularly the combination use, verify, avoid, improvise, is like, what am I going to do with this? It's like, okay, so, you've given me the feedback. Okay, so how am I going to use this to improve? But you don't say it. It's just all going through your head at the time.
Okay.
Yeah, Paul, picking up on Ian's commentary there, maybe for the avoid improvise, needing time to recharge the battery. So if I'm receiving feedback from somebody, they recognize that I need time to process and recharge the battery, then respond with picking up, I think on Cliff's point, well, what are we going to do next better? What are we going to do now to do it better next time? And combining those, but needing time to recharge the battery, because sometimes feedback can knock you off your perch. and you run the risk of shutting down. So therefore, look, give me time to recharge, think through it, come back, say, well, yes, that's spot on. Well, no, I disagree, and then have a constructive discussion. So it's about recharging the battery to get going again.
So can I just clarify that then with you, Stephen, and other avoid improvisers? Is that a separate thing? So there's process in it, that's one dimension. But is there something about the recharging like that's additional? Because that's, to me, that sounds quite separate to processing. Processing is like a cognitive thing, whereas energy is an energy thing. And I'm wondering whether it's also just a really deflating or de-energizing. What's de-energizing about it? Yeah, I'm missing it.
Yeah, I don't think they're separate. They are separate activities, but they are linked in my world. By hearing what the feedback is, and then taking the time out to evaluate, well, where did the thing go wrong, or where did it fall over, or even if the feedback was good. Usually, if the feedback is good, it's a bit easy to say, well, thank you. So there's that processing, and then once you can sort of analyze it and come back and say, well, yeah, okay, well, it fell over there. That's okay. We can do it differently this time. So therefore, okay, you see, again, picking on what Cliff was saying, you see a way out of it, and that way out of it gives you, okay, well, that was constructive. I can deal with it, and it gives a bit of momentum and stepping out, and you can do something. So even though they're separate components, still intricately linked in my world.
Okay.
Amanda's got a hand up, Paul.
Oh, Amanda, go.
Hi. Just, I guess, to add to what Steve was saying, and I was just thinking, I'm really terrible at receiving feedback. I instantly, I'm just like, you're telling me everything I already know and I've already judged myself on. So to me, the best way is definitely not right after something happened. Like if someone wants to give me feedback, not straight after, different to the authenticate people. Give me time to process it myself. And now I'm already going to come up with a list of shoulds. I should have done this. I will do this better next time. So if that person can then come up to me and say, hey, I wanted to talk about that team meeting, how did you think that go? What do you think went right or wrong? If I feel comfortable with that person, obviously, I'll say all the things that are in my mind, and I'll go, I could have done this better and that and whatever. And if just someone saying like, oh, I agree, yeah, I think you're in the right path if you do that next time. That's it. Like I don't need anyone else like hammering me on something that went wrong. Just acknowledging it and making me see that if I don't see it is enough. Like I have the discipline to then go and work with that and make it better next time. But it's really hard sometimes not to feel judged because I'm already judging myself enough. So that
It's like rubbing salt into the wounds, isn't it, Amanda?
Yeah.
We're doing a good job beating ourselves up. We don't need your help.
Yeah. Yeah, like you're not unless you're telling me something I don't know already, because I'm already trying to make it perfect. So unless you've got a different idea, I already know, and I already know I'm working hard to be like that. But yeah, I try really hard. If I'm in stride, yeah, I'll hear it and I'll go and I'll process. But instant reaction is always, well, first give me examples if it's not something I'm aware, or second, yeah, I know that. Okay, thanks. All right, I already know, I'm already working on it. That I don't need any more judgment. Yeah, I know it's really bad. Sounds really bad, but
I want to ask about that, Amanda, though. If someone asks you, how did you think that went? Is it helpful for you to have that chance to kind of talk about what you already have noticed, or would you rather not even have that conversation? I mean, yeah.
Yeah, no, it depends who the person is. Yeah, and it depends on the situation. But usually, I'll usually go and think about it myself, and then I'll find the person I want to talk about it with, and get some reassurance on this is what happened, and I'm thinking next time I should do X, Y, Z. What do you think? I'll often then go chase that feedback and that reassurance myself. But if it's something maybe I didn't think went wrong, then yeah, the lighter the approach, the less, yeah, then that would work. If the person asks me first, that would work.
Amanda,
Sorry,
you mentioned,
I'm not sure I'm expressing myself really well here.
I get it. And you mentioned that might sound really bad. I don't think that sounds bad at all. In fact, you might say that all of us, regardless of our IDs, like to receive compassionate feedback. And we all have a bias for one reason or another for it to be feedback around, let's do something about it in the future, or let's change something about the future, or make it better in the future. But, if this slide here is receiving feedback, but this conversation here, everybody's also been giving tips about, look, there's a way that we can provide feedback that is going to work across people's IDs. And I think you just gave another example of that from a different point of view.
Yeah, thanks, Cliff. I think about as well with my team, most of them are verifiers, avoid improvisers. And when something goes wrong, I know everyone's working so hard and giving their best, and they believe in in what we're doing. So when it's time to review what happened, I always start my feedback sessions asking how they're going, what's happening. And they will usually bring that up, and they'll say, oh, remember that file? I can't believe I did that. And that's enough. I don't need to say anything anymore. Like I'm like, yeah, that's okay. Mistakes happen. Like, I know they're already, like, they've judged themselves enough on that, and they're trying their best, and mistakes happen. So there's no reason for me as their manager to be going on and on about how important it is that we don't miss deadlines or whatever. Like, there's no need for that. So
Can I make a suggestion though that I think might be helpful to the avoid improvisers? Because I can see, particularly with your idea, Amanda, that you might already be well aware of what you did, so you don't need someone rubbing salt into the wound. But maybe where the discussion could go, and if they don't take it there, you could take it there, but knowing this for yourself, what's the effect of what happened? So it is what you did, and you're well aware of what you did. And Greg asked the question in the chat, well, how do we uncover what you did? And well, what you know about what you did, right? How do we know that you know that? But typically what may not be as known to you is what was the effect on what you did? Like, how did that affect the other people? How did that affect the customer? Like, what was the flow on effect? And that might be worth, because that's really the issue. It's not that you made a mistake. It's that mistake, or whatever it was, whether it's a mistake, whatever you did, it had some flow on effect. And that could be, a thing, but it could also be a feeling and a perception, and then a reaction based on that. So a customer who decides not to work with you anymore, who loses their confidence in the business or whatever it might be, and you go, but surely it couldn't, all I did was do this. Yeah, but the way they interpreted that, and then they spoke to this, and then, but that knock-on effect probably isn't the natural focus of the avoid improviser, because they're more task focused. And maybe if you took people to that and said, look, I'm already aware of what I did. Tell me what the effect of that was. Like, what happened after? That might be a good conversation for you to have. That could be rich learning.
yeah, great point, Paul. And yeah, it's somewhere I like as well when people give me perspective. So it helps me see things in a different light. So yeah,
even
definitely.
you saying to them, like, so what happened for you as a result of that? Where did you go to? And they go, well, where I went to was I couldn't work for the rest of the afternoon. I had someone say that to me the other day. I virtually, like, honestly, I just couldn't. I had to go and have a break and take the day off. you know, like, wow, you know, and you realize the consequences of things. So, yeah. Okay, guys, I'm going to move us along just in the interest of time. So we also went through this next slide here on the giving of feedback. And this is what we had up for your bias when giving feedback. I'll let you just absorb this. Any reactions or additions that you would want to add to this list?
There's something that sticks out about this whole topic about I'm giving feedback, and that's like the focus. Where to me, where I've messed up in my life, when I've made that the focus rather than the focus on what are they doing with it, what are they hearing, how are they feeling, what else is going on with their life, and this vulnerabilities of giving to me is, do any of our drives get in the way of us checking in to see how it landed? That to me, the crucial bit about feedback is what are they doing with it? How did it land with them? At Amanda's point, I might be trying to help you, but if it's hurting you and I don't know that, we're not helping each other, right? So I'm trying to think of the vulnerabilities of what stops me from being more focused on them, I guess is what I'm saying. Well, I've gotten the feedback now. How did it land? What's going on? And I reckon that's where our attention should really be, totally on them outside. What are they doing with it? Where are they going with it? And we don't even know what they heard. If they might even heard different words, right? So this is reminding me that the better I get at turning my agenda off and focusing on them, the better the feedback has a chance of getting in a place where the seed can grow.
So great point, Greg. And as I listened to you say that, you know, the first thing that came up for me was, if you're not an 8 out of 10, when you check yourself, maybe don't give the feedback, because invariably your focus is going to come back to you, and you risk reacting to their reaction. And really, if your focus is on the other person, even when they react, you could still be focused on them and not on getting personally involved in the ping pong.
Exactly. That's why when I write an email and I'm upset about something, I write a draft without putting any heading, any receiver in there, so I can't accidentally send it. And then I look at that and go, well, that's a bit rough. It takes me about 3 goes. And then I go, I've gone back to the issue. I've got less about my reaction to the issue. I'm going back. I say that there's the coffee, and then there's the coffee in the cup. The cup is the drama around it. The coffee's the information. Let's not focus on the cup, right? Let's get to the. And I have 3 goes at least if I've got an emotional charge on something, to get rid of the cup and get back to the coffee, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there's the point you're making, which I think is really valid. No matter how skillful we are at giving the feedback, that's all about us. Even if we've tried to anticipate them and their needs based on their ID, that's wonderful. And that's probably still only getting you to maybe 50%. The other 50% is you got to check in with them, because no matter what we know about their ID, you don't know all their onion skins. You don't know their PPI for where they're at right now. You don't know what else was happening before or what they're going to be doing next. So I think, checking in with them about, firstly, is this the right time to have this conversation? But as you start having it, like, where are you in this? How are you going with this? Like, what are you thinking about now? What's your reaction? And keeping the focus on them. It's if you're part of the feedback, like if you're part of the issue that you're talking about, maybe it's how the two of you work together, for example, or live together, whatever it might be. It's really challenging to keep yourself one step removed and keep the focus on the other person. That's a really masterful skill to have, but you're going to do a much better job if you're in stride first. But I think you've got to do that regular checking in. All right. And then we covered some strategies. So these were the strategies, and I'll add to these because I heard the one I wrote down from, I think it was Amanda. Don't give me, don't give me the feedback straight away. This is for avoid improvisers. Like, let me process it first. And then maybe, I'll be more ready to hear what you've got to add. But these are things to keep in mind when you're going to be giving feedback to people based on their strongest drives. Keep these things in mind so that you're more likely to land it, but then still check in. because you don't know what the consequence of the consequence is, you know, like, and so what happened next for them? Where do they go to with it? And what is it that is on their mind?
Can I just pick up on something on the avoid improvise? Because I think there's a nuance. Well, to me, there's a nuance. I think the avoid improvise, you can give us the feedback, but don't necessarily expect a response. So in other words, just allow that to sit. So it's, and that could be, you know, so give them the feedback and allow them to process. And then you might sort of circle back the following day and say, hey, just want to check in how that feedback landed. You had any thoughts or something like that? And then we by that time we've processed and we know what we can do with, something to do with it. But just in the moment, it's just like, just data that we haven't, not ready to do anything with. And I think that can then land for other people thinking we're not taking the feedback on board, or but we are. It's just the processing piece.
I think that combined with the completer, Ian, would be like send an agenda first before the meeting and say, you know, we're discussing these points here, because then for sure we'll be prepared, we'll think it through, and then, you know, the person giving the feedback can just go, what do you think about this, and that? And then we'll be more welcoming of hearing your thoughts as well.
Ian, will it help the rest of us when you need that moment, you're going to come back, that we know that's what you've done? I'd like to know you heard it and that something was received, because sometimes I do that with Vera and then she just is silent and I go, where'd that land? She's doing that processing, but I have no idea where she just went. And so it might be tough for you guys because it sounds like you're responding, but the more we can know where you just went, that's all, I guess.
I think, Greg, it's a great point. What I again have strived to do is just go, thank you. I just let me think on that. And just to basically just acknowledge. I think that's a strategy almost anyone can apply from virtually any job, but just sometimes acknowledging, yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Let me think on that.
But what's your question, Greg? What you want to make sure the person you're giving the feedback is acknowledging what you're saying?
Well, he just said, I need to go away and think about it. I heard you, but I got to go to think about it. And you go, look, I with you would be, I already know this, right? But if you don't let me know that, I don't know what happened with my feedback, whether it's useless, whether it's useful, what you're going to do with it. So I'll stop hounding you if you just go, I got that. I'm actually kicking myself about it. I'll come back to you. So we go, oh, good, my work's done here, meaning I didn't want you not to know, but I don't want to hit you with it. And so just let us, because the downs, you guys don't always say out loud that what's going on inside there. And we don't know whether we have to keep going or just shut up.
Well, usually I would say you should just stop talking and not keep going nicely. But like nice. It depends on the intensity. Sorry, Greg. It depends on the intensity of, on both sides, but someone's strong on verify and avoid improvise. Whatever you say, we're listening, like we can hear you. And then depending on how well you know that person or not, and how urgent the situation is, you just leave them for a couple of days. For sure, I reckon they will come back to you with their thoughts when they're ready, that they've processed it. If it's something urgent that you need to follow up, then go, hey, have you had time to process what we discussed? But like, I know for sure I always come back. I need closure, right? So I will come back on that. And sometimes, say Joe will give me feedback and he's like, that's it, he's done. And then 3 days later, I'm like, hey, remember we were saying something, I really think blah, blah, blah. And he's like, oh, really? Oh, I thought we were done with that. But I need that closure. So I think Vera would, definitely come back to you for that closure as well.
I think that the bottom line for those of us who are not avoiding improvisers, the silence that occurs when you guys are processing, we don't know what that means. And we don't need you to be lengthy about it. All you need to say, remind us, I'm processing it. Yeah. And then we know that you're processing. It could be that you're pissed off. We don't know that, so just letting us know, like, where are you at? and then you're free to take as long as you want. But otherwise, it's just like a big black hole, and that's really almost deathly. You know, you just what just happened? You know, everything just went to silence. So just letting us know that is huge. You know it. You know what you're doing. We don't. So just filling us in. Guys, so we're well over time. Thank you for being here again today. We'll obviously be sending out the communication shortly for our next webinar, and we'll look forward to seeing you then. Until then, stay in stride, make a difference, and thanks again for being here today. Take care, everyone.